You might be tempted to use old sheets or other lines as dock lines, or you might be wondering what to use for anchor road. And there are different kinds of rope line for different reasons, and they can be very important. We posted an article about this, and I'll leave a link in the description because it's packed with good information and test results we got experimenting with line, but a few key points I want to highlight. First, the three kinds of line we're talking about: nylon, polyester mooring line or 8 braid, and polyester double braid. Double braid, like you find in most chandleries, is usually pre-stretch, and it's intended for use as halyards or sheets and other control lines. We like double braid for sail control lines because it has very little in the way of stretch. You don't want to hoist the mainsail up nice and tight all the way to the top and then have the halyard line stretch and the sail sag and get all loose. It's actually kind of dangerous. We want a nice loose sail in light wind, but when the wind gets strong, we want the sail nice and tight to be able to bleed off the excess wind. If the sail puffs up and gets all loose, it overpowers, sometimes unexpected. Here's an example when I was sailing my laser in 25 knots of wind. The outhaul pulling the sail nice and tight and flat slipped in its snatch block and allowed the sail to puff up, and immediately everything went upside down. The same is true with all sail control lines. We want to set the sail and have it stay there so the line better not stretch. But the other polyester, the 8 braid made for mooring lines and polyester single braid made for anchor road, will stretch slightly. And then there's nylon, which stretches a lot. And it's up to us to choose which line we're going to use for which application. This is where anchoring and dock lines come into play. First, dock lines. As the boat sits tied to the dock, the wind and waves will pull and push on it, and something needs to absorb that energy, or the boat will feel abrupt and movement will be sharp, and the full load of energy will be transferred to the cleats on the boat and on the dock. This is how things get broken. But if we use a stretchy line, the movement of the boat will be more absorbed. I personally use nylon because it's the stretchiest of all the lines. Nylon will typically stretch 3 to 4%. If that's not enough, you can add a mooring line snubber to give the line even more energy absorbing stretch. These heavy rubber devices all significantly reduce the energy and make more absorption at the dock to take the work off the cleats. But nylon has a couple problems: UV and chafe. Nylon is about half as resistant to UV and chafe as polyester, so as the mooring lines wrap around cleats and pass through chocks and sit in the sun all day, day after day, the nylon will slowly break down and become weaker, twice as fast as polyester would. When nylon starts to get hard on the outside, it's likely already past its service life. So what do people use in the real world? We spoke to some riggers, and they said for boats under about 60 feet, they always use nylon for mooring lines. It's when the boats get bigger that things start to change. A bigger boat that's significantly heavier is less impacted by the waves and doesn't bounce around as much, so stretch becomes less important than chafe and strength. Riggers say for mooring lines up to about 3/4 of an inch they use nylon for its stretch, but as we get into bigger, heavier boats and mooring lines over 3/4 inch, they switch to polyester mooring lines because it offers more strength and more protection from UV and chafe. The lesson here for me with my 35-footer is nylon is king for mooring lines, and if my mooring situation exposes me to a lot of wake from traffic or predominant winds, I might add a snubber device to help the nylon absorb even more energy. If I ever win the lottery and have the need for 1-inch mooring lines on a big boat, I might switch to polyester. Now let's talk about anchoring. As the boat bucks up and down and yaws, the last thing we want is for it to be pulling on the anchor, because the anchor will quickly become dislodged from the seabed and the boat will drag. So we need something to absorb the movement of the boat, and we use chain. As the chain hangs and runs along the seafloor, the movement of the boat just lifts and drags the chain around, and the anchor never really feels very much of it. But an all-chain rode is not really practical on normal boats because chain's very large and very heavy. So we split the line. About 100 feet of chain will get you by just fine anywhere on the East Coast, and 200 feet will work in most of the Caribbean. But sometimes We need even more road to anchor, so we splice a line onto that chain. Conventional wisdom is to use nylon for that purpose, and that's what most people do. My boat has 150 feet of chain and 200 feet of 1-inch nylon, and that has served me very well. But we run into the shortcomings of nylon again. It chafes, and if it's exposed to UV, it breaks down faster. In the UK and other parts of the world, it's actually much more common to forego nylon and use polyester for anchor rode. And the logic is this: if we have significant amounts of chain out, the chain's absorbing the energy of the boat moving around, so the rope line won't actually have to be very stretchy. It makes more sense to use the longer lasting, strong, and more chafe resistant polyester for the rest of the road. Also, a snubber is usually added if more energy absorption is needed, so why bother with nylon at all? What this means for me is this: on my smaller boats where I have 10 or so feet of chain and I'm just day anchoring, I'm going to use nylon because I need the stretch. On the bigger boat, however, nylon won't last as long and may become chafed. So beyond my 150 feet of chain, I may as well use polyester because it'll likely last longer and I won't have to worry so much about chafe and UV breakdown. I will, however, keep a nylon snubber for the anchor rode when I only have chain out, anchored in shallow waters. In the Bahamas, for example, it's very common to be anchored in very shallow water, and you often won't be able to just roll out a 10-to-1 scope. Putting out 100 feet of rode in a crowded anchorage is just impossible, so you often put out 60 feet of rode in 10 feet of water, which means it'll all be chain, and you'll have to snub it somehow. For this, I use nylon. A nylon snubber will chafe and break down in UV, but I can replace it often because it's not very much of the nylon rode, so it's cheap. Every couple years, I just make a new one. What sort of line issues have you had? Let me know in the comments, and please give this video a thumbs up if you learned something, or give it a thumbs up and leave a comment if you have something to teach others. We went over the articles we've published in the last year and found a lot of people really like the sailing stories, the exciting ones like this one, the medical emergency on a BVI charter. The moral of the story was slippery sunscreen related. We'd like to bring you more of these, so if you have a great sailing story with a good learning opportunity for people, we'd love to help you tell it. Send me an email at comments@practical-sailor.com. You could submit a good story in writing or join me on a Zoom call and we can record it and edit it for people to see. I can't wait to hear from you.